Yeah, so welcome everyone to the last day of this bootcamp for the week. Here's a quick overview of what happened during the week. We were covering 4 days from Monday to Thursday, each day going through a different tutorial. And we had parallel tracks, one for .NET, which is what I'm doing now. And then there's another one running parallel for Node.js. And each tutorial is then divided into 4 sessions. So every 1.5 hours, we have a new session, and in between, I'm there just helping you with your questions. There is some dedicated time for Q&A as well, but I'm always monitoring the Q&A panel anyway. So as mentioned during the session, we are going through the code, the same tutorial that you will be going through. We are following the same steps, then explaining some things about the code itself, what's happening inside the application. And then again, between the sessions, when I'm actually not coding anything, not following the steps, I'm just there monitoring the Q&A panel so you can ask questions. And since many people tend to ask about this, we are noting it that all sessions will be recorded and published after the event. So again, just a quick overview of what happened. We had the simple viewer on Monday, then hubs browser. On Tuesday, then dashboards, which is about customizing the viewer. And today we are going to be covering configurators using Design Automation Service. Yeah, so as mentioned, you might notice it yourself as well that today we are going through a different tutorial. So this is the tutorial we had previously. We didn't have time to update this section. So we are going to be just using that part from the learn.autodesk.io webpage. And here is the goal for today. We'll end up with an application like this, which will provide a user interface where you can specify the width and height that you want to drive in the given model. You can even choose between Revit, Inventor, or AutoCAD model. So you can then just select the file that you want to play with. You just have to make sure that it's a file which does have those parameters, a width and a height parameter that we can drive. And then the chosen file will be automatically uploaded somewhere on the cloud in a bucket so that we can make it available for the Design Automation APIs to then download that file, drive the parameter values in it, update the model, and then upload the updated model back to the bucket. And each time you run a work item, you'll also get a report file from them, which can even contain console logs from your add-in, which is running inside the given product, whether, for example, it's an Inventor running on the cloud. You might have an Inventor add-in, and then that's logging some of the information about, what it's doing inside the Inventor server. And those as well would be then made available, as you can see here in the GIF, would be part of the report file. So today's agenda, just like it was during the previous days, we have 4 sessions. Every 1.5 hours, there's a different session, and in between, there's some dedicated time for Q&A. But as I said, I'm monitoring the Q&A panel constantly anyway, so you can just ask away whenever you have something to ask. So we can get started with the first session. So Design Automation API is available for 4 major products that we have: Revit, Inventor, CDS Max, and AutoCAD. And I created this diagram because, at least at the beginning, sometimes people had confusion about how exactly the API works, and they thought that it was so granular that the REST APIs, these web APIs themselves, were just exposing directly the given product's API. But that's not what happens. What happens is that you have to create an app bundle, which you can think of as an add-in. here it's shown in the red squares saying my code. So that would be your add-in running on our server and interacting with the given product. So let's say you want to be using Design Automation API for Inventor. In that case, you create an app bundle, which is like an Inventor add-in. They're almost the same. We even have a blog article, showing the similarities, how you can go from an Inventor add-in to an app bundle. It's quite straightforward. So you provide that app bundle, and we are going to upload it to the Design Automation service so that it will be available for it to use. And so whenever you start of a work item, which is when the processing starts, then Design Automation will start up Inventor server on our servers, and it's going to make your code, your app bundle available for the server, and we'll start running it. And inside your app bundle, then you can interact with Inventor server just like you are doing it on the desktop with Inventor from your Inventor add-in. So you can take advantage of the full, pretty well, almost full Inventor API functionality that you have on the desktop in order to open files, modify them, drive the parameters, update drawings, whatever the Inventor API offers you. So that's how it works, really. And then through the Design Automation APIs, those are the only functions which are available for you. So first of all, setting up your app bundles, your activities, and then just running these work items, which are like, processes. And because these are RESTful APIs, just like the other server-side APIs we have, therefore you can use them pretty much from anywhere. It could be a mobile app, it could be a website, it could be desktop applications, from wherever, really. So this is what it looks like. First of all, you're creating your Forge app code. This is what we call like the app bundle. And you can also start up with some source data if you want to. If instead of creating a completely new, let's say, Inventor file, you want to update an existing Inventor model, then that would be your source data. You make that available for the Design Automation service, for the Design Automation API. And after it's finished running, it will be providing a reports file that I already, quickly mentioned before, which will have information about some information coming from Design Automation service itself, detailing the command line arguments that were used, which version of, for example, Inventor was started up, things like that. And then your app bundle code then can create different kinds of outputs. Maybe you're turning, for example, an Inventor drawing into a PDF file, or creating IFC from a Revit file, whatever it may be, or just updating existing, desktop product models, whether it's an Inventor, Revit, 3ds Max, or an AutoCAD file. So each time when you kick off a work item, when you want to start the processing using your app bundle, then this is the process. First of all, you need to make your data available in the cloud. It doesn't matter where you put it. So it could be just, on OSS, which is our object storage service, where, in the previous days, well, on Monday, we were using that, we were creating our own bucket in order to upload files there. So you could use that. Or maybe it's available on Fusion Team, or on a Google, or on Dropbox. It doesn't really matter where it is. The only thing is you have to make it available for our service. So once your files, or once your source files are up on the cloud, then you have to send those links to the Design Automation service, including the permissions. So you either create, for example, a pre-signed link to your given file, which anyone with the link can download the file, or if it still requires like access token use, you can also provide that for the file for the Design Automation service so that it will be able to download the file. So when the processing starts, first thing Design Automation will do, it will download obviously the input files, Then it's going to run your app bundle that you specified. When you're running a work item, you're running so-called an activity, which provides a template of what exactly should be happening, which app bundles should be loaded into design automation. So that's how you can specify which, because you can have multiple app bundles, you can specify which app bundle you want to use for the given work item. So the code inside your app bundle will be running inside design automation on our servers. And once it's finished processing, then the resulting files will be uploaded back to the place that you provided link to. So when you started the whole process, you provided link for the input files, and you also had to provide the link where the resulting files should be uploaded. And just an information, inputs, outputs are not stored, they are downloaded, processed, and discarded. So this design automation service is completely independent of anything else. That's exactly one of the reasons why it doesn't matter where your source files are residing on the cloud, as long as they are somewhere where it can be downloaded from, it's fine for us. And as mentioned, nothing about this process is then stored on our servers. So the source files or output files, we don't keep them. They are just sent to the place that you defined for us, and then we forget about the whole thing. So in the first section, these are what you have to do. Just like during the previous days, first of all, you need to make sure that you have a Forge account and that you created a Forge app for today's application as well. Do I need AutoCAD, Inventor, Revit, or 3ds Max? For now, no, because we will provide the plugins, just to speed things up, because that could be a separate session in itself, how you create the app bundle. So basically, we would expect people to be already familiar with the add-in development for the given product that you're trying to drive. So as I mentioned previously, your app bundles that you will need to be running on our servers, they are pretty similar to the add-ins that you would be creating on the desktop side. So you would need to be familiar. If you wanted to run design automation for Inventor, you would need to be familiar with the Inventor API. And unlike the previous days, where we were using Visual Studio Community 2022, today we'll be using 2019, because, as I said, we are using an older sample or an older tutorial, which is, if you're following all the steps, there could be some differences in the user interface, for example, between 2019 and 2022. So it's better for you if you just stick with 2019 to avoid any kind of confusion. But the same thing stays. So I'm going to actually provide this link as well inside the chat, so you can have a look at that. But the same thing remains when you're installing Visual Studio. Just make sure you are adding ASP.NET and web development and .NET desktop development as the components. And another thing we will need today is the ngrok, which is like a tunneling service. So this will enable us to make our computer visible for the design automation service. So once the work item finished processing on our servers, then the server will be able to send a message to our computer through this tunnel to notify it that the processing finished, and then we can grab the resulting files and then also read the report about what happened. So let's have a look at this. So today we are following this tutorial. You still have to go through the home, and before you start coding, tools, sections, but then this will be the section that we will be covering. I'm just putting it in the chat as well. But again, first of all, go through the home section, which describes, the tutorials which are available on the LearnForge website. Then before you start coding, this again takes you through the steps of making sure that you have a Forge account ready and that you also created an app. One thing to make sure of is in today's sample, we are using a different endpoint locally. So as you can see, instead of 8080, we are using the 3000 port. So this has to match the callback URL specified for your application. So as you can see it in the GIF, it has to be the same for your application. So I as well can go back to the application I created that I was using through the last days. It doesn't really matter if you accidentally see my client secret because I keep regenerating that anyway. This is just a temporary application. But as you can see, I'm still using the wrong callback URL, so I can just go in and edit to make sure that is the correct one. And then you can leave all these components on by default. I mentioned during the previous days, but if this is the first session you're attending during this week, then probably I should point it out as well. So this section where you can select the API you want to make available for the given Forge app that you're creating is just an extra layer of security. Because, for example, if you only wanted to use the webhooks from a certain app that you're creating, where you're using the credentials from this Forge app, then even if by accident somehow you're exposing your client secret to an unwanted third party, even then it would still be just limited to webhooks functionality. Whoever got your client secret and client ID would not be able to do anything with PIM 360, design automation, model derivatives, or anything else, because they will be limited to webhooks if that's the only thing that you enabled. But for today's tutorial, when you're just going through the sample, you can leave all of them enabled. That should be fine. But we definitely will need the design automation API. So all should be okay. The app name can be whatever you want it to be. The description can be whatever you want it to be. But callback URL, make sure that's the correct one with the port 3000, and that you definitely have design automation API enabled for today. So this is about creating the app. Now about the tools. So we are going to go through the .NET Core section. So here is information about downloading, Visual Studio Community 2019. And since in the meantime, 2022 came out, therefore this link might be different. So I'm just trying to fetch this. Yeah, probably I have to. Well, so I'm just going to quickly fetch this link here and also provide it in the chat for everyone. So you can just simply go there. Because as I said, the link which is provided in the tutorials, that just simply takes you to the default download page of Visual Studio. And since they came out in the meantime with 2022, that's what it's going to be offering. Just to make it easier for you to find the download for 2019, I also provided the link in the chat window, so you can go directly there. So just download it, make sure you have those two components enabled, the ASP.NET Web Development and .NET Desktop Development as well. And I'm not sure if we are talking about ngrok, but it's a simple download as well. So you can just find it here. I'm putting the link also in the chat window, so you can find it there. So you can just simply go there and then download it. That's the easiest probably. And then you can just place it anywhere on the system. Just make sure that you know where it is. So what I did is actually to make it later on easier to use ngrok is I actually created a command for it. So you can just see it, basically a shortcut. So here as well, you can see where I downloaded ngrok. So in my case, I downloaded it directly into the root folder, into a subfolder called ngrok. And that's where it lives. And then I simply provided as a target this full thing, which is required. So I think it will be pointed out later, actually, during the sample, how you should be starting up ngrok when you're running or debugging your app. So that will be available. Probably I will get back to you on that, when we're actually reaching that section. But just in advance, one thing that we can do later on is just to create a shortcut for it. So whenever you want to use ngrok, we will be able to just double click on the shortcut and it will automatically set everything up. And then you will be able to just copy the ngrok URL from there. But you don't actually have to care about it just now. Yeah, so that's all it really. So just make sure you logged into your Forge account on forge.autodesk.com, logged in with your Autodesk ID, make sure you have an app, and then make sure that the callback URL is correct. It's the one that we will be using today, which is, even the path is different and also the port is different. It needs to be 3000. So make sure of these. And then download Visual Studio 2019. As I said, just so that we can avoid confusion when going through the exact steps on the tutorials page, and also download ngrok. And you can just place it anywhere on your system as long as you remember where you downloaded it. You should be fine. And that's it. So now it's your turn. So I can just go here. So again, create your Forge account. Your Forge app credentials will be available then. Install Community 2019 and install ngrok. And then in the meantime, I will be monitoring, of course, the Q&A panel to answer any of your questions. Welcome back. As you found out in the meantime, when using ngrok, you will also have to subscribe to it. It shouldn't cost you any money, but you can just go to the ngrok website and then sign up for it. And then you will have to follow a few steps in order to make that work on your account. So I guess you'll end up with some authentication token that you will need to then config for your system. And from then onwards, it should start working. So hopefully that was the only issue that you ran into. So apart from that, you had to make sure you had a Forge account, created a Forge app with the specific callback URL that we will be using today. Then you installed Visual Studio Community 2019, and then ngrok is working as well. So now we are getting to basic server and app UI part. So just like during the previous days, this is the architecture we will be using. So all the contents that we will be using is of course stored on the server side, and parts of the content will be also exposed to the browser, so that it will be able to download, the HTML file, JS file, style sheets, and perhaps images that it will need in order to present the web page to the user. And beyond that, it will also implement all the functionality related to communicating directly from the server to the Forge services, and then expose that functionality through various endpoints as part of controllers, which then can be called by the client side. So the client side code will not interact directly with Forge, because it's a good practice to keep, your access token just on the server side, because it has, too much power. It has all the scopes enabled for the access token that, could start running all your work items on the design automation server. It's better not to expose it to the client side, so someone could use that access token to start doing the same, and then create their own app bundles, activities, and then start using your account to run their own work items or something like that. And exactly because of that, to avoid that, we keep that powerful access token on the server side, and then the client side will just be communicating directly with our server, and in return, our server is going to be communicating with Forge and then pass back the messages down to the client. So the second steps we'll be going through is create a server and basic app UI. So we just need to create a new project, ASP.NET Core Web App. Actually, we have to go with the empty project again, because if you upgraded to the latest version of Visual Studio 2019, then again, the project creation works a bit different from the previous version. And if you just download it, for example, Visual Studio 2019 today, then of course we have the latest version of it, and you will face the same thing. So I think we will have to go with ASP.NET empty project, ASP.NET Core empty. But I'm going to show you that, in a second. And then after that, we need to set up the environment variables in the project, create basic server, startup CS, create authentication controller, and set up basic UI. So let's just go to the website and start going through those steps. So again, this is just an overview of what we will be dealing with. Then actually, another thing I point out that the finished project is also available. So you can just, oh, why did I zoom into it? I didn't want to zoom into it. I just wanted to go on open link in a new tab. So it will take you to the GitHub site. And there actually you can just check why is it not working? I'm trying to click on this thing. Check, for example, all the various packages that we will be using and the exact version that we are using. So it might be actually a good idea to stick with those. So let's get started, create a server. And now it's talking about the prerequisites that at a certain point, we will have to be also dealing with ngrok. I'm not sure if it mentioned that you have to sign up, but we'll see. So getting to the .NET part, creating the new project. Please send us the link. Well, it's part of the, so someone is asking for the link. So you will just find it right here. If you go on the modify your models. But okay, I can send you all the links. Wait a second. So everyone. So this is the tutorial we are following. And then for .NET, you will also find the finished project here. So if something goes terribly wrong, then you can also just double check, what exact code there should be in your project. So coming back to here, so create a web server. And we can just go with .NET Core. So as you see, this is what it should look like. So in theory, you should be able to just go with .NET Core Web Application. And then at a certain point, after creating, for example, you should be able to select empty, but it doesn't seem possible anymore with the latest version of 2019. So I think we just have to stick with creating an empty project. So that's pretty much, I think, the only difference between the tutorial steps and what we will be following. So just to show it to you, so depending on which version of 2019 you have, as you can see, this is the version I have. This is the 16.11.11. In that case, you will need to follow a different path when creating the project. You have to start with an empty project instead of core web application. So new project. And so instead of ASP.NET Core Web App, I'm going to go with the empty one, just like I did during the previous days in Visual Studio 2022, because when I quickly double checked, it didn't seem like I have the option later on to specify that I only want an empty project. And here, just make sure you have the exact naming, which is specified on the website. So you can see that it should be for example, I think. Yes, so it's for example, small case f and then capital S. For example, click next. And then we will be sticking with 3.1 because 6.0 acts a bit differently. So some things would need to be modified in the project. So since we are following the exact steps which are outlined in the tutorial, best thing is just to stick with 3.1 in case there are some slight differences that might cause confusion. So let's just go with this. Again, you can untick the configure for HTTPS because we are just testing it locally, and then it would be just an extra task to take care of this. I already have that, so I just quickly have to change that. Just need to rename it to something else. Yeah, and now we can start adding the dependencies. As you can see, it should be all 3 dot something because we are sticking with .NET Core 3.1 in the project. So there are a couple of things to add. First of all, the Autodesk Forge. I think that could be actually added as the latest version, but just to make sure, you can always double check, what we are adding here. But I think probably 1.9 should be okay as well. We'll see. Worst case, we can always just change back the version of the NuGet package to the version which is being used in the project. But actually just pointing this out to you as well, so you can always check the exact versions of the various components that the sample on GitHub is using. So first of all, we need Autodesk Forge. So you can just right click on the project and then say manage NuGet packages and then browse. And then look for Autodesk Forge. We can try to go with 1.9 to start with, and then we'll see what happens. And then we need Autodesk Forge Design Automation. So as it said, just stick with the 3-point versions. So Design Automation. We can also double check again in the thing what it was using. So 3.0, yeah. Yeah, so that was added. Then a couple of more. So Microsoft ASP.NET, ASP.NET Core MVC. Look for that as well. Again, stick with the 3.0 versions, or 3.1 should be probably okay as well. As I said, worst case, we can always just change the versions which are being used in case it's not working correctly. And the last one, related to Signalr, which is going to be used in order to keep connection between our server code and the client-side code, so that we will be able to notify our client-side code directly from the server when we get a notification from the design automation service that the work item finished, and we can pass that message down to the client side to the browser. And here it is. So here as well, stick with the 3.1 versions. And hopefully all is okay. So now we just have to set a couple of things. We can go into the debug part of the project settings and add our credentials and other things like the ASP.NET Core URLs. So you can just simply right click on the project, say properties. And inside the debug section, there should be these environment variables that you can set. So just keep copying these. ASP.NET Core URLs. And now we are adding the credentials. So we will need to copy that from the Forge website. So I have to quickly go there as well. So this is my temporary application that I'm using. So just copy the client ID from there. Forge client secret. You can always just double click inside it. You don't even have to make it visible. So you can just double click, it means copied. And then one more thing, which is the Forge webhook URL. But we are only going to be setting this variable once we actually started ngrok. So once we start debugging the application, that's when we are going to be setting this. But there's one more thing to check. As you can see, everything is highlighted that you have to pay attention to. So it should be launch browser, then all those variables we set there. You can just double check launch browser, all the variables, good. And app URL, make sure it is 3000 and that enable SSL is not there. So we just have to make this 3000. And it's time to save everything. So you can just click save all. And then we can start adding things. So first of all, we can go to the program CS file and add these using statements. So just copy it under the rest. Then replace the program CS main method content with the following. That's going to fetch the client ID, client secret from the environment variables that we just set for the debug section. So it should be inside the main. So instead of doing this, we can turn it into this. So make sure you don't remove the full content, just the content inside the main and then replace it with what's provided on the website. Yes. And then we can modify the startup CS file as well. So we can just copy the content, add another namespace that we are going to be using. So just add it underneath the rest. And now replace the content of the startup class with the following code, which enables static file servers and Signalr, which we are using to push notification from the server side to the client. So you can just copy to clipboard that section as well, but make sure you're only replacing the relevant parts, not the whole content. So as it said, replace the content of the startup class. So only select this section, which is inside the startup class, and then replace that with the new code. Again, save everything. And now we can start adding the authentication controller, which will be exposing an endpoint to the client side, and also will implement, in this case, the parts which will be communicating directly from our server with Forge. So create a controllers folder. This is pretty similar to what we did, Monday, Tuesday as well. So you can just right click on the project, add new folder, controllers. And now we can add our first controller, which is for authentication. So you can just right click on the controllers part, add new item, select the class, and then change the name straight away. And now we can replace the full content of this file with the following. So you can just select everything in here and then change it. So in this case, we will only be using dealing with an internal token on Monday and Tuesday. Yeah, both days. We had both an internal token that we kept to the server and also a public token that we exposed to the client side. It was only needed for the viewer in order to display the models. But in today's sample, we are not going to be using the viewer, so we don't need to expose any access token to the client side. We'll only be working with an internal token, which will have all the scopes enabled that we need, because we need to make sure that we have a specific bucket where we are going to be uploading the input file, and also we'll be receiving the resulting files as well. So we have all those scopes enabled. Also data read, data write, data create, and code all, which we need in order to run design automation processes. So because it has all these scopes enabled, the access token, this is why it's internal and kept only on the server side. And when using design automation, you only need a two-legged access token, which is again the simplest version. We also used this back on Monday, when we were interacting with buckets and uploading files there. So in this case, you can just use the client ID client secret. You send a simple request to the Forge server, and straight away you will get back an access token that you can start using in order to drive the design automation services. We also have like a helper function here to get back the Forge client ID and Forge client secret from the environment variables. Okay, so we can continue. And we can go to the basic app UI. So to add something that we can show to the user. So just like during the previous days, first of all, we create a folder which will be containing everything that we will be exposing to the browser. So the HTML file, CSS, JavaScript, and maybe images that the browser can access, download, and then present it to the user. So that's why we create this folder. So just right click on the project, add new folder. And as soon as you change the name of that folder, the icon should turn into a globe. So then you know that you didn't make a mistake of a typo or something. And now we can start adding contents there. So first of all, the index.html file. So it's an HTML page, but straight away we are changing the name of that to index.html. And you can just copy the full content from here and replace everything here. And you can look through it, what exactly is happening here. First of all, we are going to be referencing a file that we are just about to create, a JavaScript file, which will provide all the functionality related to communicating with our server and then, drive the Forge functionality. Here's one reference to the library related to Signalr that, again, we are using. It's a component that enables our server to push messages to the client. By default, there's only a one-way communication between the client and the server. So always the client is requesting something from the server and the server responds back. By default, servers can't just push messages to the client code. So in order to achieve that functionality, we are using this Signalr component. And a couple of things related to, Bootstrap components, jQuery that we are using in the sample. So those are referenced as well. And then here's the section where we are presenting the user with edit boxes where they can specify the width and height that we are going to be using. Also for input file, so the user can click that and upload the file. And then we are listing the activities that the user would be able to run, and then button for starting the work item. And we also have like a modal dialog that we can pop up for the user. And this is where we are going to be listing all the app bundles which are available locally, and then you can select which app bundle to use and also specify which engine to run, whether you want to run Inventor and also which version of Inventor you want to run on the server side, things like that. And now we are going to create a subfolder in the www root called the JS, where we are going to be storing all the JavaScript files. So you can just right click on this, add a new folder. There's the JS folder. And now we can create this JavaScript file. So right click on the JS subfolder and say new item and select JavaScript file, change the name straight away. And now we can just copy all the content from here and paste it in the file. And then make sure you're saving everything. You're still thinking about something? I'm not sure what. But anyway, here you can see the functionality and the various endpoints which are being called from the client side. So these are the endpoints that we still need to implement on the server side so that we can respond, like getting the list of or creating a given app bundle. You can see it's a post request. or creating an activity, or start a work item, and then also, pass on inside the form request the width and height that the user specified on the website, and then we can start running those work items. So all these functionalities provided here. And start connection. This will set up the connection with the server using this Signalr connection. So then once we started up this connection, from then onwards, the server will be able to push messages to the client side. And we can just run the project to see that everything is working as it should. So we can select, for example, and there it is, the user interface. And then I mentioned, we have this modal dialog that should pop up when you click the configure button. So this is the modal dialog that will pop up. You can select your app bundle and select the engine that we will be using. But these functionalities have not been set up just yet in the project. So this is how far we got in session 2. And then the rest will be implemented later. At least I think so. Yeah, because this next section is already prepare plugin. So if I go back in the presentation. Yeah, so this is how far we got. So create an ASP.NET Core empty project. So it's saying depending on which specific version of 2019 you have, you might be creating an ASP.NET Core web app or an ASP.NET Core empty app. So if you have the latest version like I do, in that case, it should be ASP.NET Core empty. And then just set up the environment variables inside the project setting under the debug section. Then we are creating the basic server, modifying the startup.cs file content. We created the authentication controller, and we also set up the basic UI. So that's how far we got. Now it's your turn to implement these on your side. And then I'll be monitoring the Q&A panel. So if you have any questions, just let me know. Great, let's continue. So hopefully you managed to create your .NET app, set up the environment variables, start up CS file, auth controller, and adding the basic UI so that you can present something to the user when we are running our web app. So in this session, we are going to be preparing the plugin. Basically, we are just actually getting the plugin, but when we also need to add the code that will be uploading the app bundle to the design automation service. So as stated here, you can just download the plugin from this website, from this URL, and then we are going to be adding the logic for creating an app bundle. And I think this URL will actually be part of the tutorial section, so we can just go there directly. So prepare a plugin. I'm going to be going with Inventor because that's what I'm familiar with. So the best thing is just to go there. You can, so this is just actually a link to the actual product like Inventor. I guess it's just to give you some information about that. And it just provides some background on, what a plugin looks like, how you can prepare one. But as I said, during this training, we are not going to do that because for each plugin that you will be developing, we would need a separate section, session, one for AutoCAD, Inventor, Revit, and 3ds Max. But still, I'm just going to be going with this one. And in each section, it doesn't matter whether you chose Revit, Inventor, or AutoCAD, there should be a link for the given engine where you can download the zip. And then you can just put it inside the bundles folder in case of Node.js, but in our case, it will be the for example, www root and then bundles. Okay, so let's just click on this link. As you can see, I downloaded quite a few times already. So my system is already at the 5th version. Yeah, and what else will we need? So this part is actually talking about the app bundle itself. Yeah, so as I said, we are not going to do that. We are just going to be placing the zip at the correct place. Again, it should be in the for example, www root and then bundles. So first of all, we need to create a subfolder for that. So in the www root, there should be a bundles folder. So you can just say create new bundles folder. And then you can right click on it. And I think we should be able to open it in File Explorer. Let's go here. So there's the bundles folder, but now I have to fetch it from my Mac. It should be in the downloads section. This is the latest version. Just place it here. I'm going to change the name because we don't need this part. So it should be just update IPT param. It might be called something else. I'm not sure when you're downloading the Revit version or AutoCAD version, but that's the main thing. So just place it in the www root bundles folder, that zip file, and that should be it. And then skip this section. So we can go to the next section, .NET Core, and now we can add the functionality related to actually, uploading a bundle, generating an activity, and also kicking off the activity, which what we call a work item. So under controllers we need to create this file. Yeah. So controllers, add new item, and this should be a class. And then we are changing the name straight away. And then replace the whole content with this. So just copy it, replace everything, and there we go. And as you can see, it doesn't have much at the moment. We will keep adding additional methods here as highlighted in the code. So we can continue. First of all, we have the code which will be fetching the app bundles from our server directory. As it was pointed out, it will be in the bundles folder. So www root bundles, that's where we place the zip. And this endpoint is going to provide a list of those zip files. So we can just copy this. So this is where we can keep adding the functionality. And as you can see, it's also exposing this endpoint for the client side. So the client will be calling this, and then we are going to be providing the list of zip files available on our server, and then pass it back to the client. What else do we have? To get a list of available engines. Again, this too will be exposed through an endpoint for the client code. So API Forge design automation engines. And it's simply going to use the Forge SDK in order to guess a list of all the available engines. So it will contain, Revit, Inventor, and also the various versions for each product which are available. So Inventor 2021, 2022, 2023, and the rest. So it will be quite a long list. And that's exactly why we also have to handle pagination here, because I think it's the max limit is like 20 items in a single request. So we have to keep sending requests in order to fetch the complete list of all the available engines. Now we are implementing the endpoint for creating an app bundle. So add that here as well. So again, it's just going to combine the zip file name that we already passed to the client and the client side code. There will be a drop-down box where the user can select the zip file that they want to use for the app bundle. And then we are fetching that zip file. And then first of all, we are checking if you already have the app bundles, if the given app bundle set up on the server side. So first of all, we are getting a list of the existing app bundles, and then we are checking if it already has the ID based on the nickname, app bundle name, and alias. And if it's not there yet, then we are creating a new app bundle. Otherwise, we are just creating a new version for the app bundle. Yeah, so we also have to add the following lines. Add the following lines. So copy to clipboard, find the startup.cs file. And it should be going in the configure method. So this is here, and we should be just adding it after the others. This is to make the Signalr functionality work. If you remember, Signalr is the library we are using both on the server and client side, which will enable us to set up a connection between our server and the client-side code running in the browser, so that the server will be able to push notifications to the client-side code. So when the work item finished processing on our server, we'll get a notification, and then we can also notify our code in the browser, and then we can pop up a message for the user. And if you run the web app now and click on configure, top right, you should see the app bundle and the list of available engines. Buttons do not work yet. So that's all we need to check to make sure everything is working. So if you go back here and run force sample again, so just click run. Then it should bring up Chrome. And then we go on. Couldn't fetch one of the environment variables. Yeah, that's actually possible. I have to double check. Yeah, because accidentally I set all these variables for the IIX Express instead of setting it for the force sample. Yeah, that's a mistake from me. In theory, we could use the IIX Express version as well. So, but it requires, that IIS is set up properly on your system. So it's probably better if we are sticking with force sample. I just need to add these variables to force sample as well. So I can just copy them from here. I'm not sure if there is a quicker way of copying all these settings, but well, hey ho. Oh, did I even copy the ASP.NET Core URLs? Yeah, I copied it at least. That's good. So we have the client ID. Come on. Sometimes it's a bit sticky. Client ID. Client secret. And then the last thing is the forge webhook, which we are not using actually just yet, but might as well place it there already. We are going to be using it only at the very end, so we don't need to set the value for it. So let's just make sure we are saving everything and then try it again. And hopefully this time around it shouldn't error out because my client credentials should be working. So hopefully it's bringing up now Chrome at the root folder of the web page at the index.html part. In case it's not doing that, maybe I have to open it myself. Or maybe it's just thinking a bit too much. I don't know what's going on. But anyway, so here it is. And then if I click configure, now it should pop up. As you can see, it lists the app bundle that we added into the correct folder and then all the engines which are available and I can choose from. So I will probably go with Inventor 2023 later on. But you shouldn't do anything just yet. You know, don't press the buttons anyway, because we still need to add the part which is actually setting up the activity as well. So far, the only thing we have implemented, we have the UI, we have the app bundle that we downloaded from the tutorial website, from the GitHub repo. And we made sure that we can set up the app bundle, but that same part should also set up the activity at the same time. And we don't have that code implemented just yet. So this is how far we got. Make sure that this works so that the app bundles are listed, the engines are listed, and that's it. That's how far we got in session 3. So now it's your turn to implement these steps. And then let me know if you have any issues. Yeah, so hopefully everyone managed to finish this section as well. So prepare your plugin. Basically, that just means downloading it from the given URL, which is also provided as part of your tutorial section. And then we added the code that is going to be uploading the app bundle to Design Automation Service so that we will be able to use it later on. So now in this last section, we just have to finish things. So one of them is about defining the activity. So setting things up and then executing the work item. So creating an activity and executing a work item. The way I look at things in a design automation is that, you know, checking the prepare a plugin, define activity. So dealing with the plugin, dealing with the activities is all part of the setup. So you might not even need to create actually an application for that. We have utilities you can use. I'm going to show it later. One extension in Visual Studio Code, which is available. We also have a website, the DA Manager, Autodesk.io, where you can, you know, create or upload an app bundle, also define an activity. And then the work item is the one that you would be that you would keep running from your web service or desktop application or from wherever you want to use design automation. So once you set up everything, you have your app bundle activity, you just do it once, or whenever, you know, you want to add extra functionality, for example, to the app bundle, then you would upload a new version. Or you want to modify the parameters and activity, you would do it again, but it's not something that you would have to constantly be doing. The only thing you have to constantly do from your application, whether web service or desktop application, mobile app, is just running the work item. So that's what we are going to be adding as well. So let's go back to this section, and now we are going to be defining the activity. Just make sure you're selecting the .NET Core section for that. Yeah, so one thing I wanted to actually point out is that, when you were doing this prepare a plugin section, so let's say I'm selecting Inventor. Yeah, so you only had to do today this. So we were not going through, installing the design automation for Inventor, Visual Studio template and all that. Today we were only finishing this section, and then you could just skip that section. Just a note in case some people missed it. So now back to defining an activity. Again, make sure you're selecting .NET Core. And we keep adding things to the design automation controller, which we already started working on. So there will be one function related to getting the given command line, depending on which product you want to work with. It will be different. So this is the command line that is going to be run on our server. That's going to be specifying, the exe to execute in case of Inventor is the Inventor core console, and also the parameters that will be passed to Inventor server in this particular case. So just copy to clipboard and then go back to the design automation controller class. I can close this. And as you remember, this was the section where we can just keep adding functions. Now for creating an activity, again, this is going to be exposing an endpoint on the server side, which the client side will be able to call in order to create a new activity. Yeah, so you can look inside the function what exactly happens, just like it was with the app bundle. Here as well, first of all, we check for the list of activities that we already created for our Forge app and check if this already exists. If it's not there yet, then we are creating a new activity. Otherwise, we are not doing anything actually. So in case of the app bundle, we are uploading a new version. In case of the activity, we are simply not going to do anything if it was already defined. And this is how you specify the activity. There are certain parameters that we need to provide, like the app bundle that we want to use from the activity. As I said, activity is basically like a template. So it defines how the work item should be run. So, again, what input and output parameters it will have and which app bundles to use. You could be using multiple app bundles as well from the same work item. So this is what the activity defines. And these are then the parameters, input file, input JSON file, output file that you will be able to provide when running the work item based on this activity. So as you may remember on the slide, we had to make sure that the file is available somewhere on the cloud and then get the URL of that file, which the design automation can then use. And so this is what we are going to be passing in as the input file. And for input JSON, I think we are just going to be passing directly the text, which will be containing, the parameters that we want to use. So the input file, we already uploaded somewhere on the cloud, but in our case, it's going to be in one of our OSS buckets. And we are just generating a pre-signed URL for it that we can pass to design automation. The input JSON file, instead of uploading a file somewhere, we are just going to pass directly the content of the file. And based on that content, design automation is going to generate this input JSON file, which locally on our server will be called params.json. So this is what you can specify using the local name, what the file will be called on the design automation server. And it's very useful because, from your app bundle code, then you can always rely on what the file name will be. So It doesn't matter what the input file, for example, let's say I'm working with an inventor part file. It doesn't matter what it's called inside the bucket. Locally, it's going to be called whatever I want it to be called. And then our app bundle can rely on that and then just open the given file based on that. Once we gathered all this information, then we can create a new activity and then also create an alias. You always have to create an alias for anything, the app bundles that you're creating, and also the activities. You also always need an alias, which is like a tag on a given version of that component that you uploaded. So, you can keep uploading new versions, for example, on an app bundle. And then you want to use, let's say, the 4th version of the app bundle for some reason, you can just tag it with the given alias that you want to use for it. In our case, we keep using, I think, the dev. So we are just going to be using a dev alias, which means that your application can always just rely on using this given tag, and then separately in a different app or utility, you can just move that dev tag to whichever version you want your app to use. And that's it. So that's the activity creation. And this is about listing the activities. So as you may remember, in the user interface on the left side, there's also an edit or a drop-down button where we are going to be listing the available activities. So the user can just simply choose which activity they want to run. And this is going to be exposed through this endpoint on our server, the API Forge Design Automation Activities. And as you can see, we are just using the Forge APIs to get a list of all the activities that we have. We are ignoring the latest because there's just an internal name for a given activity or app bundle as well. It would be the same. It's only internally used. This is a kind of alias, but it's only for internal use, so we can just ignore that. Yeah, so once we did that, we should be able to now click the configure button and define the activity. And now it should, at this certain point, we could already, stop with this section and just give it a test. So we can just run the sample, which should compile it as well. And then I'm going to show you the utility as well, because it's useful to have it. For some reason, it does not seem to automatically bring up the Chrome browser. I don't know why that is. So might as well show you first that we don't have any app bundles or activities set. So I can't fetch it from here. Well, I can just simply fetch it from here. So here is the utility that I wanted to show to you. So this is the address. So DA manager. And now I'm simply going to fetch the credentials for it. So you can make it, part of the URL. So you can provide it here, and then you don't have to, keep typing it in again and again. So you can just put it here, and then the client secret as well. So then you can store this URL, and each time it will automatically fill in the client ID, client secret, and then I can just click login. It doesn't do much because it's just a two-legged authentication. And as you can see, I have no app bundles for this given Forge account, no activities, but there are a couple of shared ones which are provided by the engineering teams that you could use if you wanted to. They are also available for you, both app bundles and activities. Some people are using, for example, the plot to PDF, which is available for DWG files. So you could just simply run this activity directly from here. Even in this utility, you can just click on something and then you would be able to provide the parameters. All you really need is just the URL for the DWG file that you want to use. and where you want the result to be stored, and that's it. But I'm just showing that at the moment we don't have any personal app bundles or activities. But when you click on configure, and now we can select, this is the app bundle we want to use, and I want to use it with Inventor. Let's go with 2022. And I click the create update. You can see in the text what's going on the server-side code. So defining app bundle and activity, app bundle done, activity done. I'm not sure if there are more things listed there, but as you can see now also the drop-down button on the left side got updated. So now we have something to choose from. There is now an existing activity that we could be running if we wanted to, but our sample is not finished yet. But now if I go back here and check the app bundles, you can see I have a single version of this app bundle, and here is the tag I was talking about. So you can always tag any of these versions, and then your application can just simply rely on that tag. So it can say, I want to run the update IPT param app bundle, or I want to be using from an activity this update IPT param app bundle dev version. And that's what you're going to find in the activity as well. So inside the activity, we have a single version of this activity. This is the dev version. And it's going to be referencing this specific app bundle. You can see this is the client ID of my Forge app, dot the name of the app bundle, and plus dev, the alias that I want to be using. And once I had multiple versions of this app bundle, as I said, I could just add the tag to whichever version I want the activity to be using later on. So it's really simple and useful. And I could also be running, even from this utility, this activity if I wanted to. You can see the parameters that we defined, the input file that we'll be getting, the local name used for it, the input JSON, output file, and the engine. We are going to be using the 2022 Inventor version. And then again, the app bundle we are going to be using from this activity. Yeah, so that's how far we got. And then we can continue. Wait a second, I might as well just close this. We don't need it anymore. Okay, so now we are adding the code for executing the work item. So this is how we can start the work item. As usual, we are exposing an endpoint on the server, which in return is going to be calling Forge services in order to start the work item. So I just copy this to the clipboard, and this as well should be going to the same design automation controller class. Where are we? Here's the design automation controller. Let's just go to the end of this. Let's see where we added the last function. Yeah, here we are. And just paste it there. So when you're running the work item, it will be based on a given activity. As I said, you can think of activity as the template for a work item. And you will have to specify the same kind of input and output parameters that were defined in the template. So you've seen we have the input file, the input params, and also the output file. So these are the things we also have to define when running the activity. But in this case now, the only thing we have to really provide is the URL for those parameters. So the input for the input file, or the URL for the input file. And as I said, in case of the input JSON, instead of uploading a file somewhere, we're just going to be passing the content directly. And that's what we are doing here somewhere. I just have to find. Yeah, so we are creating simply a JSON object, as you can see it here. We're passing in the width and height values that we got from the user that we collected in the browser. And then the input JSON. We are turning it into a string somewhere. Oh yeah, here it is, the input JSON. So instead of providing a full URL like https:/something, and then you provide a full URL for it, instead we say that we are not providing a URL, we are providing the content for the file. So we are saying data application JSON space, and then providing the actual full string for the JSON content. This is how we are passing that. And then output file, where the created, the updated file should be sent. And the onComplete would be the callback that we want to use. So where, the endpoint that design automation can call on our server in order to notify that the work item finished processing. And then in return, our server then can notify the client-side application, running in the browser, so that we can tell the user that the work item finished. And I think that's really it. Well, we still need to implement the callback endpoint that I just mentioned now, that design automation server will be able to call. So it's going to be this API forge callback design automation. And here's the part, hub context clients, client ID. This is when we are using this Signalr library in order to notify the client-side code in the browser. And then we are just downloading the report URL as well, and then display the content directly in the text box of the browser. And then we are also providing a download URL where you will be able to download the file that we just created. And just an additional function, you can also clear all the content from your design automation server this way. So this is probably the easiest way to fully clear your account, all the app bundles and activities you created. If you wanted to start from scratch again, you can just create your account using this delete forge app sync async function. And that should be it. So now we should be able to debug the application. So you can also download some sample files for it. As I said, you can't just use any file because we expect those files to have these parameters in them, which then our design automation app bundle can drive. So let's just click on the sample files and download something. Inventor sample file. Yeah, as you can see, I have that as well already. So it's in the downloads. Yeah, and that should be all. So now let's see how we can test the sample. So all the code is there. We should be able to just build it. But in order to do that, we also need to, update the callback URL, which is for the ngrok. As you may remember, the forge webhook URL, we will need to update it to the ngrok URL that we will be generating. So hopefully you downloaded ngrok already. I just updated to the latest version in the meantime as well, because the UI, looked a bit different for my version. So here is the latest version, which is 3.0.3, I think. And what you can do, which is, well, I find really useful, is that you could just, once you find the ngrok exe on your system, wherever you downloaded it, you can just right click on it. And then you can say send to desktop. which is going to be creating a shortcut on your desktop. I already have that. So here's the shortcut. And then you can click properties on it and then specify all the additional parameters that you want to provide. So you can just go into the shortcut target section and then make sure that you have everything, which is also specified on the in the tutorials page. So ngrok exe http 3000, and then make sure that the host header is actually, my colleague pointed it out that on the tutorial site, it was with a single hyphen, but it needs to be a double hyphen. So it's hyphen, host, header, and then that should be equal localhost : 3000. So I just set it up like this. And this way, I don't even need this to be open. I can just always double click on ngrok, on the ngrok shortcut, and it automatically has everything set up correctly. So I can just use this ngrok URL directly from here. And then go back to Visual Studio and add the value there. And now I should be able to run the sample. App URL, that should be, I think, 3000. I don't know why it wasn't. Interesting. Make sure you save everything. So again, this is the first thing you just have to update before running the sample, the webhook URL based on the ngrok URL that you got. And make sure also the app URL is 3000 because that's where we are running the application. And now let's run forward sample and let's see what happens. So we already have the app bundle and activity set up, as you may remember. And we have the activity here listed. So what we can do is we can try to set some values here. Let's see, 100 and 100. And now we can choose the file that we want to work with. And on my system, it should be available on my Mac in the downloads folder. Mentor sample file 02. And now I should be able to run the work item. So first of all, it's uploading the input file to our bucket that we created. Now it kicks off the work item and yeah, it's success. So here's all the information from the report you can see. So you can see that it was successfully finished. It provides you, what the command line was that started the whole process on the design automation service, what the various input and output parameters were that was provided for us. And then what was happening while Inventor was running. Try to make it smaller, but I can't. So it's also going to be providing information about, the Inventor console, which version was running, which Inventor server is used. This is 2022.2. What's happening inside, and the iLogic plugin got loaded. It's opening the document. So this is where, as you can see, the document was placed. And it was open from there. And then executing the run method. And inside the run method, then we were updating the document with the new parameter values which were provided here. And we should be able to also download the file. Now let's see. So it should be 100 and 100. We'll see if everything is correct. And the easiest way to check is if I go manage, parameters, and then you can see, yes, both of them are 100 inches because I did not actually provide the unit. I just provided the values in this particular case. So everything seems to be correct. It got updated. Yes. So I'm just wondering if there was anything else I wanted to talk about. Yeah, so one more thing, there's another utility. So I just showed you this one. Where you can check your app bundles and activities. There's another utility which can be useful for you. So instead of DA, it's going to be saying OSS, but you can specify your client ID and client secret exactly the same way. So you can just say this, login. And here you can actually see the design automation bucket that was created here. So this was the input file and the output file. And when I click on it, it should also kick off the translation process. So it's going to be translating the file to SPF so that we will be able to display it in the viewer. So it's just another extra utility which could be useful for you, in order to upload new files to the bucket, check the files that were uploaded there. Let's see what the input was. I think that had different values. Yeah, so this is the original model. Okay, so now it's your turn, creating an activity, executing the work item, just finishing basically just finishing the project. And if you have any questions, I will get back to you. I've seen one question already, so I'm going to get back to you in a second. And we are back. I hope you managed to finish these items as well. One thing I forgot to point out, because it was brought up by one of the attendees, is that we only need ngrok for local testing. So when you're running this server application, on your computer, and the server, design automation server would not be able to send messages directly to your computer because it's not exposed to the internet. That's why we need ngrok. So that's creating a kind of bridge that will enable to accept the messages from design automation server and then pass it on to your computer. So that's the only reason we need ngrok. So once you deploy your application to a server, whether it's AWS or Heroku, wherever it is, it will be exposed on the internet. It will have a URL that other servers will be able to call, and then you don't need ngrok. So I just thought I'd point that one out. And if you need more help, then one of the easiest things is to go on Stack Overflow. We have a couple of tags that you need to use depending on what topic you're asking about. And just definitely make sure you're using the correct tags, because that will make sure that those Stack Overflow questions will end up in our support system. So we will see that you asked the question on Stack Overflow, and then we can get back to you directly there. If you don't want to ask something in public, then that's also possible. So you will find the actual email address here in the support FAQ. You just FAQ. If you scroll down there at the very bottom, there will be the email address you can use, which is forge.help@autodesk.com. I'll just quickly put it in the chat window as well. So you can send an email there as well. It will end up in the exact same support system with the exact same people looking at your question as if you post it on Stack Overflow. So the only difference between the two solutions, asking something on Stack Overflow or sending a message, an email directly to forge.help@autodesk.com, is that one is in public, the other was in private, but the same set of people will be answering your question. And about this event, this was the final session this week. We're going to be sending an email with the links to the recordings of these sessions, provide the slides for you as well, and also a survey so that we can get some feedback from you about these sessions. And if you want to, get further with your Forge development, you can also consider attending one of the accelerators. These are 1-week events. Hopefully in the future, after this COVID thing, we'll be able to do some things in person as well, but otherwise it would be online. We are always creating a specific Slack account for the event where we can interact with the attendees, you can ask questions, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. And even setting up Zoom calls if needed to make sure that you can implement whatever functionality you want using Forge. We also have some lightning talks available at this address, forge.autodesk.com/lightning talks. So that's definitely worth checking out, along with also the blog, of course. There are loads of blog posts available there about the various Forge components. Whenever we get interesting questions or something keeps coming up the same time, or we have something to announce, then we talk about those things on the blog. So check that one as well. And I will stay around for a bit longer in case you have any questions, but apart from there, thanks very much for attending this event, and all the best.